under the age of 10. I'm like, why? Why can't there be like an adult version of a ball pit? I mean, it looks so much fun. You have to dive in there.
Oh, there is. I'm from New York, and I went with a couple of my cousins a couple weeks ago to this trampoline indoor place. And they had something like that. And that was the first time I ever jumped into it. It was fantastic. So I know what you mean.
The euphoria of just
my only
around.
advice would be they should have adults only and a kids pit. You don't really want to mix the two.
Yeah, I think that's generally why there is the signs. Yeah. You don't want to crush
you
something.
You can be at your pace or do things at your speed, because you always have to be aware of all the little kids around. It makes sense. Like you want your own area, like an adult only area.
Yeah.
Kids can be messy. That's all I'll say. Kids can be messy.
Yes. Yeah, my kids are actually grown up now to kind of want to go to those places again. When I used to go a long time, they were small enough, you had reason to go there into these places with them to kind of protect them from other things going on. But yeah, they outgrow that.
The last time I did a ball pit, I was a kid and I went to Sesame Place in Pennsylvania, for those of you in the US. And the pit looked great, but once you got in, you discovered that it had like a foot of water on the bottom.
Oh.
So it kind of turned me off to ball pits after that.
No, yeah, exactly. Goodness only knows what's floating around in that water.
Yeah, it was. We hope it was rainwater, but
yeah, you hope. But yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
On that lovely visualization of kind of.
And now we're recording everything, so everyone will get to see this stuff.
It's like in Star Wars, where they go into that junk pit, with all the water and the things submerged, that kind of strange creature that's going to grab you and pull you under the ball pits. No one's going to ever go to a ball pit ever again after this.
All right, I think we'll get started. I have my recording on. All right. Hey, everyone. Thanks for joining us for our August edition of the PowerAddicts Meetup. And we are super excited to have Natalie and Scott join us today. They are subject matter experts in their domain areas, and we are so looking forward to learning everything that we can from them. And we're excited to be able to share our thoughts, comments, and collaborate in this space. Before we get started, just a couple of announcements. We have a couple of events coming up. So number one is the PowerAddicts community call that happens every Wednesday, or I should say every third Wednesday of every month. So, I'm going to drop a couple of links. So be sure to join those calls. We have a variety of guests that come and talk about several interesting features, announcements, and they show demos. So I'm going to drop a couple of links there. And then the next event we have is the Powerful Devs Conference. So that is going to be showcasing how developers can embrace Fusion development teams and leverage the Power Platform to build apps faster with lesser effort. And you would get the opportunity to connect with a lot of pro dev influencers, Microsoft Cloud advocates, and several community leaders and members from the Power Platform teams. And it's a free event, so feel free to join that. And that's going to happen this September 14th. And then one other event that I wanted to highlight is the M365 Bootcamp that's happening the 20th and 21st of August. And this is going to be focusing on addressing collaboration best practices using Microsoft Teams, SharePoint, Power Apps for Automate, M365 security and governance, and a variety of other services. And this is a free event as well. And they also have a call for speakers open. So if you are interested in showcasing something that you've learned along the way or you've implemented, you can definitely do so. And here are our links. I will drop them right here. Taking a while, but while I wait on that, I will have Natalie get started on her presentation. And for those of you who are new, she is the PM leading the independent publisher and certified connectors for MS Power Automate and Power Apps. And so this is kind of like her brainchild, and she did have a couple of community folks and subject matter experts help her along the process. And she is going to talk to us everything that you need to know about how you can get involved and how you can benefit from these publisher connectors. And then, of course, we have Scott, who is he's a Microsoft Business Applications MVP, specializing in Dynamics 365 and the Power Platform. And he is also the original creator of the Ribbon Workbench. And I think he wrote that like over 10 years ago, and it very soon became the go-to tool for customizing Dynamics 365 command bar. So thank you, Natalie and Scott, for joining us today. And Natalie, this is all yours.
Thank you so much for inviting me and for having me today. Excited to talk to you all about this. And I'm so happy that Daniel's on the call as well. Daniel has also been very heavily involved in this effort. You'll see his name on a lot of slides in this presentation. So glad to have you here, Daniel, as well. Awesome. So Independent Publisher Connector Program. Let's get started. So have you ever wanted to submit a connector to the platform, but couldn't because you didn't own the API? And like today, you know, we only allow companies to submit APIs to their own API, to the company, to the underlying service of their own company or product, right? Or have you ever wanted your work or your brainchild or your baby to be available directly within the product, right? So that's exactly what independent publisher connectors are here for. And it's to bring the best together where it's a great idea to apps, flows, and data in general, right? As we know, connectors are all across the Power Platform and are beginning to really surface within PVA as well. So it's an exciting time for the Power Platform, for connectors, and especially for us opening kind of the gates and the doorway for people to start submitting connectors that they've built, whether they've built them on their own or that they've collaborated with other folks on. This is feedback that we received specifically like in MVP summits, even before I arrived at Microsoft, that folks felt limited by the fact that they could not submit connectors to the platform. So we have that now, which is awesome. And so I just want to take a moment to call out the project coordinators who've been meeting with me at one point weekly and even more. And as you see, Daniel's on this list as well. So huge thank you, because we've all been working together and making some of the key decisions, the key experience updates, and the future of the program. Essentially, the goals and benefits of submitting a connector to our platform. Essentially, a lot of it has to do with branding and gaining visibility across the Power Platform, whether that's through documentation, through blogs, through community calls, which will be coming shortly. We'll have our own section within one of the calls so that we can highlight this on a regular basis, as well as, you know, blogs, social media posts, and videos. So one-on-one interviews that are going to be optional, but are another way to increase brand and awareness of your name or your company directly within the product. You'll also have maintainer rights on that connector, right? So you'll share those maintainer rights with Microsoft, which is pretty awesome. You can also share and collaborate on building custom connectors. I've heard a lot of feedback in the past that this has always been difficult, and people were sending and working on custom connectors via email, right? So hopefully this will slowly also close that gap. You can also receive this official stamp that your connector has been validated and certified by Microsoft, because we're certifying it to the same extent as we do for our partner certified connectors and all other connectors in our platform. So it's a stamp of quote unquote legitimacy, which is pretty awesome. And then also this is an open source contribution, right? So I have spoken to a couple of folks who help lead the MVP program. They're completely aware of this. They're completely supportive. So it's an awesome effort to be a part of, especially if you're an MVP. Cool. And, you know, just before we go into demos or going any deeper, I just wanted to share the connectors that are in production today. So right now we have 8, and Etsy is almost in all regions, but not yet in all. So it's pretty exciting. But then what the next slide is even more exciting, because we have a lot of connectors. We have connectors available very soon. So these are folks that have submitted a while back that we're still processing through certification, through testing, and through other you know, topics that we have to go through internally, as well as, you know, connectors coming a little bit later that have been submitted a bit more recently. So there's a lot of really popular names that we see here. I mean, we have Spotify, of course, submitted by Daniel, which is awesome, Discord, and just so many others. that are going to be super beneficial to the end user, right? And I'm excited to see what people build with these connectors, whether they're apps or flows or so on and so forth. So of course, like even once these connectors that I've listed on the past two slides are submitted, right? You can always submit updates. You can always work directly with that publisher or just continue submitting more actions, triggers, and other functionality to these connectors. So it's really exciting to see the momentum that's coming out and that people are excited about this. And then another one that I want to call out is this idea for fun connectors. So Daniel had submitted a Chuck Norris connector and a dad jokes connector, which is pretty awesome. So we're finding another way to show these two connectors and more, because we know that this is an exciting part and kind of gamifying and having fun with our existing Power Platform. So we do want to make sure to surface these. So internally, we are finding ways to make sure that these can get published as well. So just wanted to call those out because these are definitely pretty cool. So let's go right into the GitHub repository. I'm not sure how familiar folks are with this, but we've had this for a couple of years now. We've been, as part of submitting a connector as a certified or partner connector, people have had to open source their connector. So that's why we have this folder here for certified connectors. And in that folder, in addition to third-party certified, you can also find first-party connectors like Planner, which actually some of our leadership has committed to, which is pretty awesome. Stephen, who's the GM of Power Automate, had added a couple of actions and functionality to that in there. And then we also have custom connectors, which is more of just a folder that has connector samples. So for folks who don't want to go through the certification process or kind of just want to share what they've built, but not really own that maintainership or not have it directly available in the product, that's where you go and put your share connectors here, and anyone can do that anytime. And then of course, independent publisher connectors, right? So these are connectors not submitted by the direct API owners, but they are certified, they are validated, and what's even better than that is that they're available directly within the product. So, I'll have a slide on the certification process, but I just want to give a quick tour of what this all looks like, right? So we do make sure we've been trying to label the steps and who takes on what, whether it's in Microsoft's hands or ours. So we've received some feedback about that. So we're trying to continuously get better there. So you can see a lot of these that I listed on the other page. So yeah, we have a lot coming. And essentially, if we click on any of these, you can see that our validation tools automatically spit out exactly what needs to be done with the connector. So if you see here, we have a couple of checks that we always look at for each of the connectors, whether it's certified or not. So we have some automated validations, but then we also have some manual validations that the certification engineer comes in, looks at all the files, provides feedback, of course, make sure it's actually connecting to the endpoint that it should, just to make sure that, it's not, the data isn't getting sent or pulled from some random place, just to ensure that that's all good. And then we also recently added a discussion section because we realized a lot of people were getting really excited about collaborating and asking for new connectors in Twitter and in other places. So we wanted to bring that all into one place. And so Daniel actually started the connector ideas section within discussions. And we've been seeing already a couple of ideas that people have been asking for. So this is also a great way to find collaborators if you have an idea or if you've built one in the past, but you want to add some more functionality and you're not sure what functionality to add. This is definitely a good place. Of course, forums also have existed, but we want to make sure that this is specifically the home for all independent publisher connectors and anything related to that. We also have our manifesto and the wiki and a lot of other information that you can take a look at, as well as a really detailed README in the specific independent publisher connector directory folder with best practices and other information that we call out. And of course, we also have our own documentation for the process that is public and that you don't have to go reach out on GitHub too. So yeah, that's just a quick tour here. Any questions about GitHub? You can feel free to unmute yourself. Let's move into the process then. So essentially, for folks who've used GitHub before, if you haven't, that's completely fine as well. Essentially, create a fork in GitHub, and then you add all the files together. And then once we have the PR and we've labeled it, right, our team is notified and we start looking at it. So as I mentioned, we do have some automated validations, and then we also do some manual validations on our own as well. Recently, we've also asked publishers to submit screenshots of successful flows, just because this will reduce time, certification time and testing time on our end. And we just want to make sure that we're not receiving broken connectors, because that was the case in the beginning. And of course, if a connector is broken at any time, we will take it down or we won't publish it. So we just want to make sure that's mutually beneficial for both parties here. So yeah, I just boxed out the parts that have to do with any reviews that our team does, or anything that we're expecting as well. So between these two stages, sometimes there is a bit back and forth, like comments about, this is what we accept, this is what we don't. And a lot of that information, like I said, is in the README and in documentation. And we're growing that list more and more to make sure that people build connectors that are the best that they can be, so that they can also get as much usage as they can for those connectors. That's just the process. Now let's go into the product. So the purpose of this demo is for me to kind of show you all that a misconception in the beginning when I started talking about this feature was, okay, where do I go to download this? Where am I supposed to go into App Source or something like that? And the one really big thing to note is that these connectors are actually available within the product, right? So if you go to the connectors page, including in Power Automate, you can see there's a section for independent publisher connectors. And you can also see that they also pop up as recently added. So we see here Etsy, that's still being deployed to all regions right now. So yeah, these connectors are available here, ready to use as long as you have a premium license. So they act as all the other third-party connectors that we have today. And the same goes for if you're in Power Automate, like creating a flow, whatever it is, you can still find these connectors, right? And so if you saw on the previous page, one thing you'll note is that, they all have the same icon, right? And they all have independent publisher in parentheses, because we do want to make sure that our users are aware that this is not created by Airtable, right? And it's not created by Microsoft. And they can always take a look at who it was published by. And this screen is pretty much the same for each of the independent publisher connectors, except of course we changed to it's published by, the overview, which is also provided by the publisher. And we always show when it was last updated, so that people are aware. And then you can always go straight into the source code or view the documentation. The other thing that I really wanted to show is the connector page itself, right? So the exciting thing is that, I'll just wait for it to load. The exciting thing is that, we have the last updated part here. They're all supported under the MIT license. You can go and view on GitHub. You can also see documentation. So a lot of it is super familiar to the user, both within the product on this page and the docs, right? There's not a big learning curve for users to take a look into this, except, unless they want to dig in and verify who the publisher is so that they can trust them. The exciting thing is that we're looking to really expand this page going forward in the next couple of months. So one thing we're hoping to add is a submit an issue button for makers who are not comfortable with using GitHub and would rather have Microsoft submit an issue on their behalf for the connector. We're also looking to add ratings and reviews for these connectors, as well as telemetry to really gamify the experience. A lot of publishers in the past have shared that would be really cool to see, what are the usage of their connectors and how they stand in terms of ranking. So, we're hearing the feedback, and we're definitely putting that in our plans. But, you can always feel free to reach out to me anytime if there's anything else, any other ideas that you have. Right? Even if you're not a project coordinator, you're not a publisher, and you have anything, we're always open to feedback, and we'll see how we can prioritize and make it happen. So yeah, so it's pretty cool to see that it's just like any other connector, and you can build flows and apps in the same exact way. Okay. And as I mentioned, additions to the UI are coming soon. We're also always open to improvements to the certification experience, right? Before we weren't asking for screenshots, but we realized because we were getting broken, we started adding more requirements, but we also made a lot of things a lot more clear, and we're really trying to empower and help our publishers to build and submit successful connectors. So this is an never-ending improvement process, and we're always very open to hear feedback and see what we can do in the short term and also in the long term. And of course, you'll start seeing a lot more blogs, social media engagements, and videos directly with the publishers. We're still getting everything set up internally, but that is definitely going to happen. No doubt about that. So we're really excited to start really amplifying, as we do at Microsoft, all the publishers that are part of this program. And more incentives. Again, I've listed the goals and the benefits of the program, but we're really at this time open to everything, any kind of feedback, any kind of idea for what other benefits we can provide. We're really excited because this is, we just pushed this out on the 19th of July, and there's just so much more potential, so much more to come over the next few months, and especially going into next year. So bring the feedback towards me. Yeah, so essentially, if you have a custom connector you've built that you'd like to officially publish, put it up on GitHub, add it as a PR, make sure you read the README and the PR template to help you out. And if you don't know which connector to build, go straight into our GitHub discussion to find the top ask connectors. And I will also just copy this slide and send it in the chat, just so that you have everything really nicely together, and you can move forward with this beyond the call. But yeah, that's all I had today. Just wanted to cover everything from a very high level. Again, hoping and looking forward to, seeing you all at one point, whether you're cheering on the publishers who've built these connectors, whether you're using them, providing feedback, or becoming an independent publisher yourself, right? Again, we're really trying to allow the community and Microsoft to really co-drive this effort. Because we know at the end of the day, it will definitely help our users. So thank you, everyone.
So awesome, Natalie. I'm so excited for this, especially because it's not, we have the space now to not just come up with great ideas and share ideas, but you can, if you spot something that's not available today and you think would be a great idea for a custom connector, you can go share an idea. Or if you want to build one, you can build one and publish one going through this whole process through GitHub. Or you can also fork an existing one, right? And then collaborate with one of the original owners and see if you want to add some additional features. So it's kind of like, it gives you the best of both worlds, where you can not only consume and, get benefit from using them, but also by sharing what you know already. We had a couple of questions on the chat, and thanks to Daniel, he's been helping moderate the chat and answer the questions. But if anybody has a question, I know Jamie, you had some questions. Do you want to unmute and ask?
Sure. I think Daniel addressed some of them, but I'll reiterate one or two. Is Microsoft going to be monitoring the telemetry of these connectors? And if so, are they going to report on failures, or are they going to help the independent publishers understand what's going wrong? And I guess last part of that question is, will the publishers know how often their connectors are being used?
Yeah, great question. So we actually had a situation like this last week. So we are actively monitoring telemetry, and there was one connector where we found it had 0 successful calls. So we immediately opened an issue in GitHub, talked through, found out that it was more of a user problem and the connector is actually not broken. So we are actively looking at that every single day, and making sure that we communicate that issue right away. Going forward, as I said before, we'll actually have that telemetry posted on each connector page, just so that we're fully transparent, and folks don't need to have to wait to hear from us about how their connector is doing. The other thing is, even in the very short term, when it comes to blogs and anytime we're talking about the community, just in general, or jumping into community calls and having our own separate slot. We'll also have a leaderboard, so you can see which ones are at the top for that month, or which one are the most used out of all times, right? So we're definitely going to start showcasing that in blogs, but long term, we want it to be part of the product, just to remove that boundary. I have a question for you though. Do you think it would also be really helpful for us to show, in addition to usage telemetry, but to also show like, you know, just like any health metrics for the connector on the connector page? Or would you rather the health metrics be private between you and Microsoft?
I mean, I as a user, I would like to know if there's a problem. Obviously, if a connector is not working, I'd like to know before I start using it. I think a satisfaction rate of some kind, like, you know, this connector is you know, working 95% of the time or something like that. Or if there's a way for users to provide feedback, like this connector works awesome, or, you know, this connector, eh. Again, I'm not 100% sure I don't think that exists today for regular connectors, so maybe that's outside of scope. But you know, the ability at least Microsoft to put forward the things that are really popular and really working well, and say these connectors, check them out. You know, at least to that extent, that would be helpful, because then people will find things they may not know exist.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think the good thing is like everything will be living in GitHub right now, so people can see if there are issues, right? But we're not expecting customers to go in there to see issues, right? If we do know, if Microsoft does realize that, you know, in that case, what happened last week, it wasn't the connector was broken. It's just that one of the descriptions need to be like, the user needs to essentially read the description, so we just need to improve the documentation, right? But in the case that the connector is actually broken, you know, we will definitely engage with the end users. And we do this today. Maybe you've gotten like an email about like a connector deprecation. So when there's a huge issue, or let's say we're deprecating an action or something like that, we send out emails to the users for them to know right off the bat, right? And in the case that, let's say, you know, we do have a connector that was great, but it's broken, right? It's not working. We're getting feedback left and right and issues left and right. And it's something that our team can't fix and the publisher can't fix because either they're not available or for some other reason, right? We'll see if anyone else in the community wants to maintain it. If not, we will take it down, right? And of course, we don't want it to get to that point, but we do want to make sure that there's nothing that's actually completely broken on our platform. But yeah, the whole idea of what you're saying is providing feedback. That's exactly what we want to do. We want to have reviews. So, you know, out of 5 stars, how would you rate this connector? What else do you think it's missing? So that's definitely something we're hoping to implement in the next couple of months as part of like the next phase of this feature. But great feedback.
Awesome.
And thank you, Daniel, for answering all these questions in the chat. I'm like scrolling through and I'm like, oh my goodness, keyboard warrior.
If there are any more questions, feel free to unmute yourself or continue posting the questions on the chat. Natalie's still going to be hanging around with us, so should be happy to answer those. And Natalie, what's the best way to reach out to you if anyone has any feedback or questions? I shared your Twitter handle, but if there's, you know, if there's another way that they can reach out to you, I think it would be good to share.
Yeah, you can also add me on LinkedIn, and I sent my email, so feel free to just email me there. So feel free to reach out anytime. And then if anything, we can always schedule a chat or talk further.
That's awesome. I think one question that I had, I think that would be nice to get some clarity on. So there are really 3 different buckets of connectors, right? You have the custom connectors, certified, and then the independent publisher connectors. So how different are they? And, you know, there are some that are available out of the box. There are some that are for extension and use, and some that are certified. So it would be good to understand like what the differences are, you know, on each of those.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I remember back then last year, like November and December, I like created a diagram exactly for that to really see like the gap that we have by not offering independent publisher connectors, right? So we have custom connectors, right? So those are essentially like the starting point of all, right? In order to build a connector, you go through the UI. Now the question is, you know, if you want to use it internally for some private API, you know, you keep that internal. Or let's say some companies, I've realized they want to have their own version of, let's say, the Jira connector, right? So then they build their own custom connector to Jira and they use it in their own environments, right? And the thing is, the custom connectors is environment specific, right? So things get really complicated once you start sharing across environments because there's no quote unquote master copy of that. So that sometimes gets a little bit confusing, and we're also addressing that as a separate problem. And then you have, first-party connectors to Microsoft services, so SharePoint, Planner, et cetera. And then you have, and some of them, and then Microsoft also builds like third-party connectors too, right? So Salesforce is actually not owned by Salesforce, and it's not an independent publisher connector. It's built and owned by Microsoft. And then you have the next bucket of, connectors built by not Microsoft. And those are certified connectors and independent publisher connectors. And the certified connectors are those that are built by the underlying API service. So Adobe builds the Adobe connector. And then you have independent publishers where it's like, Daniel builds the Discord connector. So those are all the buckets that we have today. So that's a great question. And I think, the other thing is custom connectors, right? When you're sending them around, there's no way to kind of publish them to or deploy them to all tenants, right? And so that's the other good thing about independent publisher connectors, because if somebody just, if let's say even one company built their own version of the Jira connector or some other connector, and, for them, it'll be beneficial to submit as an independent publisher connector, because then everyone will be able, and their company will be able to use the same version, right? And it'll also benefit the greater community and other folks who want to use that connector. So we're really hoping that satisfies a lot of the gaps that we see today, especially with custom connectors.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. And thanks for taking the time today to share all of this with us. And I'm sure everybody have those little gears turning around in their head, figuring out what they want to do next. And, I'm sure they have a bunch of ideas. I have a couple of ideas too. So I'm going to be looking out at GitHub to see what's out there and maybe collaborate on ideas that with the screenshot that you just showed us, where people are already collaborating on ideas and things. But thanks again. And we hope we see more and more connectors published. And, we have a whole open source community run set of independent connectors that everybody can benefit from. Then I think now we're gonna, if there are any other questions, we do have a couple of minutes. If you want to unmute, feel free to ask a question. If not, we'll move on to Scott. He is going to be talking to us about the first ever command designer that comes complete with PowerFx for expressing all your powerful low-code logic in your model-driven apps. So we're super excited to be learning more about it.
Thank you. Yeah, we're good to go then. There's no more questions. That was an awesome session. So exciting. I have to say, I'm really excited about Daniel's dad jokes connector. That's going to be awesome. So I don't have to go and research my dad jokes before I tell them to my kids, which is going to be great. Okay, so we get good to kick off then?
Yes, we are. It's all yours.
Excellent. Good stuff. Yes. So thank you. And I'm really excited to be here. And thanks for asking me. So I am going to be talking about PowerFx buttons in model-driven apps, which was announced just over a month ago, but just been released into public preview a couple of weeks back now. So it's very exciting. Quickly, I'm Scott Durow. I've been an MVP since 2013. So there's my contact details, which I'll put at the end as well. I've got some resources, a few blog posts as well that you might want to look into. But I've been around CRM right from the beginning, version 1. So I've had that privilege to see the platform grow up, as it were, transforming from what it used to be as like just a CRM system into what it is today, which is like just this amazing platform. And what I really love, one of the things I really love about the platform is the fact that unlike so many other alternatives, we've got the best of both worlds. We've got like the ability to have this really rich low code, no code way of building apps and automation, but side by side you've got this ability to include pro code. So you've got these fusion teams that can work together and to really produce amazing solutions, which some of the things that I see people building is so amazing, which is, and really it's the productivity of that low code and the extensibility and the no cliff story of the pro code working together really that makes a difference. And a couple of years ago I did a session at the Scottish Summit 2020 with Sarah Lagerquist, and we introduced this hashtag ProCode No Code Unite. And really, it's about saying, look, we've got this amazing platform, best of both worlds. Let's just work together rather than picking sides. So you might have seen that hashtag around, but the great thing that we're seeing now is this app convergence story, and there was the custom pages released as well into public preview, and previously when I was just doing CRM stuff before even the Power Platform was a twinkle in certain people's eyes, there was really there was no notion of this low code app, and then Power Apps came along, with App Magic as it was before, but model driven apps, which came from the CRM world, there was no real overlap. You had this sort of pixel perfect drag and drop low code expressions, and then you had the model driven stuff, which was quite pro codey if you wanted to extend it. But over the years, we've seen the overlap starting to come closer and closer together. We being able to embed Canvas apps inside model driven apps. And now with the custom pages, but really the end game is this app convergence. So the two, you really don't have to pick if you want Canvas or you want model. It's just a single app type, which you get the best of both worlds. And so really the interest in model-driven apps is amazing for me, because I've been involved with model-driven apps right from the beginning. And now with what we're starting to see is more and more people actually starting to use model-driven apps, because really it's not about picking one or the other, which is pretty cool. But if we look at model-driven apps, if we go back to the early days, this is actually CRM3. This is what the command bar looked like if you were using a CRM3 app, and it grew up over the years. And then we had this kind of ribbon thing that came from the Office Online and Office suite, which is kind of adaptive and quite complicated. But then it went back again to a sort of a normal toolbar, a command bar in CRM 2013. And actually what we have today, which is the command bar in model-driven apps, you can see that actually it's not far off what we had in the first place. It just had this bit of a meandering path into this ribbon. Now, when 2011 came along, it was a very complicated beast to customize. Before that, it was quite simple. We had this very simple customization ISV config file. But then when 2011 came, it was this huge blob of XML. And so if you wanted to add a button, you had to jump through so many hoops to do that. And it was about editing XML. Even you'd had to use SDK messages to call the API to download XML to then go and edit your solution and re-upload it. So it was very error prone, which is so I built a tool called the Ribbon Workbench. Now, if you've only been using Canvas apps today, you may not have even come across the Ribbon Workbench. But if you've come from, had any contact with model-driven apps and wanted to customize the command bar, you may have actually used it. But what I was trying to do with that tool was to hide all that complexity of all of this ribbon XML and make it easy for you to sort of drag and drop things on and make simple expressions to be able to, to control what those buttons did. And so I introduced some smart buttons, and I'll show you quickly about that in a minute. But what's happened is that as the model-driven apps have grown up over the years, and we've moved away from that ribbon XML, away from that kind of multi-tabbed, different size buttons, groups, expanding, collapsing, depending on the amount of size. You've got all that complexity completely moved away that to a simple flat toolbar. So we've got this legacy of all of this complexity. And so actually the Ribbon Workbench isolates you from that, but it's been really long overdue, I think, for Microsoft to implement a kind of a first party way of customizing that command bar in model-driven apps. And of course, it works perfectly at the moment. It's a real prime time to do it because of PowerFx. This standardizing of the expression language that's come from Canvas apps. This really neat low-code expression language. It's very Excel-like. Obviously, it's so easy to write. And so it kind of makes logical sense to sort of combine those two things. How can we get model-driven apps using the Canvas app stuff, but also how can we bring that PowerFX language into other areas of model-driven apps? And so it makes perfect sense to use it for command bars. And that's what's been released very recently. And so it's like there's an early version, it's in preview, and there's a lot of work to go, but it's really exciting because it means that you can now do some of the things that you used to be able to do really take a lot of work. You had to even write JavaScript and, using the Ribbon Workbench and actually understand how it worked. Quite complicated, quite time consuming. And now you can just do it in just a few minutes. And I'm going to show you a demo of that, but really, really quickly. So if you've used a model-driven apps, you'll be used to this. But if you've not used model-driven apps before, the command bar is the thing across the top, okay? There's other things like the business process flow. That's not a command bar, so we're not talking about customizing. And then we've also got the sitemap down the left-hand side. That's not the command bar. And then at the top, we've got the left-hand side office bar. That's not what we're talking about. On the top right, we've got a load of buttons there. Some of those are actually customizable, and they are a command bar. Some of them are out of the box, like, your profile button and your the cogs settings. Those aren't customizable, but you can add things there to a command bar. There are some widgets and things inside a model-driven app that do have what looks like a command bar, but it actually is not. You can't customize it. It's kind of built into the PCF control that's implemented there. And then also we have a command bar in grids that are on forms. So, you can apply certain commands on different records, which is really cool. It's contextual. And the same way as if you've got a sitemap home ribbon, home grid, you can have a command bar and run commands on there. So these are all these buttons that you used to have to use the Ribbon Workbench. It was really the only practical way of doing it, unless you really fancied pulling your hair out with some XML. And so the Ribbon Workbench kind of grew up with the platform, if you like. It's actually 10 years that since I wrote it, the 10-year anniversary. So it's really fitting, actually, that we should be, Microsoft should be doing this. So it kind of used to use Silverlight, and it used to be very sort of 2011 looking. And then it kind of gradually grew up as the platform grew up. And so what we have today, and I'll just show you quickly what it looks like. You can drag and drop buttons on there, and then you can add rules and commands in against those buttons. And I've also got like smart buttons, which are kind of like allow you to sort of use templates. So, for example, if you wanted to open a dialogue, you can drag that on. You can give it a title, and you can give it the URL of a Canvas app or a URL of a custom page, and then you can open that inside a model-driven app. So it wasn't low code, if you like. It's kind of less code, okay? Because obviously, if you wanted to do anything else, you just have to use JavaScript. So the Ribbon Workbench is like now effectively what we're going to refer to as classic command bar buttons. I think that tends to be the phrase that gets used. And so what we're looking at now is Microsoft's released this version 2 of Commanding, and so I'm going to show you what that looks like. And one of the important things I should say right now is that it's a journey, right? So you can't do everything that you can do in the Ribbon Workbench. You're going to still need the Ribbon Workbench to do certain things if you're currently customizing model-driven apps. But you can call JavaScript from these version 2 commanding, but you can also call PowerFx. And so over time, I expect a lot of the functionality that currently you do in the Ribbon Workbench eventually is going to be unlocked. So, at some point in the fullness of time, maybe the Ribbon Workbench won't be used. You'll be able to do everything through PowerFx. And I've got a blog. I'll put the link at the end, which kind of compares the two and shows what you can and you can't do. And I'm kind of constantly updating. Actually, I recently updated it with some new functionality that was recently released in it. So it's quite exciting. So I'm coming into the solution editor here. And what I've got here is an app. So I'm going to open the app in the preview. So not the old style editor for model-driven apps, which you may have used, but I'm using the preview editor, which is, I love it. It's WYSIWYG, really easy to use, much more kind of accustomed to what you might be used to in a Canvas app style editing. And what we've got here is we've got the idea of we've got pages, and those pages could be tables, and I've got account and contact here, but we can also add custom pages, which is another preview. And then what you can do is you can then define your navigation, which is the left hand side, and you can add those pages into the navigation. But what I'm going to do here is I'm going to edit, use the ellipses against contact, and what we've got is a new button here that says edit command bar preview. And what this does is it launches the command bar editor. So this is the equivalent. This is like the equivalent of what the Ribbon Workbench would be doing. And remember, as I showed you all the different areas on the model-driven form that you can customize. Well, the similar sort of thing here. So as you can see here, as I change this radio button here, it kind of shows you where you're going to be customizing. So I'm going to customize the main form, okay, on a contact table. And when I say edit, what happens is it kind of gives us a view of all the different buttons. And again, you can sort of see that that's kind of similar to what you'd get in the Ribbon Workbench, subtly different in terms of the layout, everything. But rather than dragging and dropping from a toolbar, what I do here is I'd say new command. And that places a command on my my command bar here. And what that does, it gives me a load of properties down the right-hand side here, which I can edit. Now, if I select some out-of-the-box ones, you can see here that this stuff here on the right-hand side is actually grayed out, okay? So, and the reason that it's grayed out is because those are classic buttons, if you like. They're version 1 buttons. And so they're not editable at the moment. As I understand it, eventually they will be able to be converted up into version 2. But what I'm going to do here is I'm going to use my new command that I've created there, and I'm going to call it like so, send for credit check, something like that. And the idea here is I want to be able to update a value on the contact form, set a flag, and maybe go and create a task for somebody to do, and then maybe can show a sort of a notification that we did that. Now, previously in the Ribbon Workbench, you'd upload a web resource and sort of select an SVG icon. But now what you can do here is really cool. You can select from like a list of different icons, which is quite nice. So you can kind of pick whatever icon you want to. So I'm going to, if I pick a heart. Actually, there's a funny little bug which I noticed today, which if you look at there's something quite a little bit wrong there, back to front, but I've reported that, and it'll get fixed soon, I'm sure. So there we go. If I put that there, what we've now got, we can do tooltips, accessibility text, all of that kind of good stuff, similar to what you might do in the Ribbon Workbench. But when you click on Open Formula, what we now unlock the goodness of all of this this PowerFx. And so what this gives us is a command like an expression language, which is exactly the same. It's PowerFx, the same as in a Canvas app. So what I might want to do is if I wanted to update the current record, which is we opened this contact form, remember? So I'm going to open up the contacts, and what I can refer to as self. And I'm going to say if you use the IntelliSense, it's quite good, but selected means that the current record that you have open in the form. Now, if you were running this command from a grid, you would use the all items, and actually you can run commands on multiple items if you select them in the grid. So if I wanted to, I could actually update multiple records directly from the command bar using all items, which is really, really cool. And in the blog post that I put at the end shows you how to do that. And so I'm going to use the item here. And what I can do now is I can just do a normal patch command. So I can say like credit hold, and I'm going to say credit hold. I'm going to set this to yes, like that. So we're going to set that to yes. And so then what I can do is say like notify, credit hold set or something like that. And so if you were going to do this in the Ribbon Workbench, you'd have to write this in JavaScript to make a call in JavaScript. Now, you can, down here, you can see you can actually still run JavaScript. So if you did find that there was something you couldn't do in PowerFx, you've still got that kind of get out of jail, if you like, using JavaScript. But, over time, there's going to be more and more functionality opened up. At the moment, you can only do things directly on Dataverse operations, but eventually you're going to be able to unlock, other connectors and stuff that you'll be able to do directly from these command bars. So now if I save and publish that, what that's doing is it's actually creating behind the scenes a component library. And so if you've used component libraries before in Canvas apps, they're effectively a set of functionality that don't really have necessarily any user interface. They may have a component, but they don't actually have to have a user interface. And so if I just play that and let that load while I go back into my solution, and if I look at my solution here, you've got this component library here. And so if I open this component library, you'll see that actually this starts to become really, really familiar. So let's edit that. Let's close that down. So I'm currently editing in the command bar editor, so I need to override my session there. But if I come into my model-driven app, here we go. Let's just check it's actually working and it's doing what it says it should do. So there you can immediately see I've got my send for credit check button. And if we look down at this credit hold, if I set this to no, because we were going to set it to yes. So there we go. And if I click send for credit check, you can see here the credit hold set is set. And if I refresh this, you should see that, oh no, of course it's not setting it. Okay, well, this is still in preview, right? There's always an element of a surprise when you're kind of doing this. But if we were to let's try a different thing. Let's try setting credit limit, okay? So let's just to see something going on. So if I go and say credit limit like that, let's just set this to 100 like that. And what we're doing here is you can see that what I'm doing is I'm actually now editing this not in the command bar editor, but I'm actually editing inside the component library. The two are interchangeable. And what this does is it introduces some exciting prospects, because if I come over into my data here, I can add like an additional, data source. So I can add like tasks in, for example. So if I wanted to, in addition to doing that kind of patch, I could create a task, so because now I've got that ability to access the tasks dataverse. So default tasks like that. And I'm going to set the regarding to be self-selected item. So it's going to be regarding the task is regarding the contact tab open, but I can set up other so I can do set other things like due dates and all of those kind of things. So we'll close that off. And so what are we getting? What have we got here? Let me see. The patch has some invalid. Okay, why is it giving me an invalid? Interesting. It's always interesting working on. Oh, I can see why. There we go. So
the best part is always someone troubleshoot while they're.
Yeah, exactly. That's right. Yeah. So that worked a second ago. Oh, there we go. Yeah. Okay. Interesting that it's not letting me do a subject on here. Let's try that again. No, it's not going to let me do that. It let me do that before, but I know why. Of course, of course, because I was writing JavaScript earlier and using single quotes. Okay, so credit check. There we go. So now what I've got, because I've edited this not inside the actual command bar editor, I can save and publish that and publish this version. And then of course I'll close this and like that. And what I can do now is if I go back over into my app and I go back into edit my app and do the same as I did before. Oh, not in the classic one, in the preview editor, of course. Hopefully that's going to be the default button eventually. And so if I go and edit the command bar like that, and go the main form, edit there. So now what we've got is, because I've edited it inside the component library, I can just select this and I should see my updated, you can see. So, and the reason I've done that is to kind of show you the sort of the fact that we are editing the same component library. It's just a different user interface. Now, of course, if you didn't need to add that additional data source, you probably never need to go into the component library. You could just do it all from here. But if I now go and do a play on that and go over into my contacts and open up, one of these one of these contacts here, I go over the details and look at my credit limit. If I do this and save that, yeah, the patching of the current item is for some reason not working at the moment. But if I refresh this timeline, yeah, nor is it actually creating. Honestly, this did work when I tested it this morning, 8 o'clock in the morning. But something has changed since then, but there we go. But it may be because I'm using the I've enabled release wave 2. It could be, but if we were going to do that using JavaScript, it would take a considerably long time. So let's just try. If we've got time, I'll go and try doing I'll go and try editing a command bar on a grid. Let's see if we have any better luck with that. And so let's go and try and update multiple values on a grid. So if I go to add a new one on that, and what I can do is, let's call this, update credit check, like that. Let's give it an icon. Let's use a different one this time. Let's just use that one like that. And so if I open the formula bar, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to try and update. I'm going to paste in a previously used expression here. So what I'm doing here is I'm using the all items. Remember before on a single form we were using item. This time I'm using all items. And so what I'm doing is I'm patching the contacts and I'm using this record. So it's iterating over each of those items, and it's going to update the credit hold to be yes. But the reason I wanted to kind of show this is that there's also this visibility rules. Okay, so in the Ribbon Workbench, there's a whole area around enable rules and disable rules. So you can say, if I added a new enable rule in, I've got lots of different things. So I can say if the form state is new, or if it's existing, or if it's the selection number or a value on a form. You can do lots and lots of different things here. Well, we've got similar sort of functionality here, not complete parity yet, but we've got similar kind of things. So I can say something like count rows, self, and then I can say selected and all items if it's greater than 0. So what I'm basically saying is only show this button if the number of rows that are visible is greater than 0. Because I only want to be able to apply this button when I've had some rows selected in the grid. And then if it's visible, it will run this command here. And let's just do a notify to say it's done, like that. And then let's save and publish that. And then we can go and test that out. And so what this should show is when I go into my model-driven app again, I should be able to go into the home page, because remember we edited the home page of the command bar, and I should be able to select one or more of those contact records and be able to use that button to update the credit. So I'm going to go here now. What I really love Wave 2 in so many ways. So we've now got the ability to add in columns. So I can add in like the credit hold a column easily. And before, if you was going to do that, you have to go and create your own view. But now you can just simply add it in there, and we can even like do things like move them around, like reorder them. It's really, really great. So you can see here we've got credit hold no here. Now at the moment we're not seeing the button, but with any luck, if I select multiple of these, we don't of course see the button. So I'm going to refresh that. And then hopefully this time we should see the button appear. Oh yeah, there we go. I just had to do a Control F5. So let's just do that and add in credit hold again, and close that and pop that at the top and apply. And so we can see what we're actually doing. So let's select these three. And then, so if I click this update, these 3 columns here should set to yes. So if I do that, done. Wow, it worked. Awesome. So you can see. So again, actually the first example I showed would have probably been the easiest in JavaScript. To do this in JavaScript would be considerably harder, because you'd have to be, iterating over multiple records and calling the web API for multiple records. But, it's so simple doing this way. So really, really exciting stuff. And I mean, as I said before, it's a journey, right, that we're going on. So, there are some things that at the moment you're going to have to go back to the Ribbon Workbench. If you've got existing buttons, for example, you're going to have to carry on using the Ribbon Workbench. But I would encourage you, if you have got existing buttons, to sort of start to consider this new V2 commanding and think, okay, well, what functionality do I need in PowerFX in order to start using it? Remember, again, it is in preview, so it's not production ready yet, but start to think about the opportunities, and if there are some things that you need to do that you can't do, those are the sort of things, just let me know and we can start that conversation about how best that could be achieved. So there we have it. I mean, that's a little bit whistle stop tour, and apologies about the first example not working, but good job there. 1 out of 2 ain't bad, right? So there's some links. There's a comparison of the Ribbon Workbench against the PowerFX buttons. Shows you what you can do, and in it where things are possible in V2 and where maybe then they're not yet there. And also got like a video in my YouTube channel that shows you kind of how to do this stuff, and also like a how-to blog post there on how to add some buttons and add additional tasks and things like that. So there we have it. Hopefully as excited as I am. And again, eventually, what I can't wait to is the point where actually, we're not even talking about Canvas apps or model-driven apps. That isn't a thing. We're just talking about Power Apps, and I think that's why I feel so privileged to be talking at the PowerAddicts Meetup, because it really does demonstrate that I used to be a model-driven guy, but where I'm moving to, I'd just be proud to say I'm a Power Addict, just working with PowerAddicts. So if there's any questions, I would love to try and answer them.
There's been a lot of excitement building up in the chat, Scott. I'm sure you haven't had a chance to look at that, but everyone's super excited and everybody's been like, wow, this is so, so powerful. And especially just the convergence of the user interface just makes the app maker's life so easier. It's, you're used to working with PowerFX. You don't necessarily need to do JavaScript for, majority of them if, as long as it's supported. You kind of still have this low-code designer that you can use and support any visibility and any sort of commanding actions that you would want to do. So that's really cool. And I'm sure everybody's, trying to get their hands dirty and, try and play around with all of this. I know this is still in preview, but are there any limitations that you'd like to call out? Like you can do certain things. Like, for example, I know there's only support for Dataverse tables, right, at this point as a data source.
Yes, absolutely. That's definitely a quite big one, because a common ask I get is, can I run Power Automate Flow from a button? Because you
did have that question. I think Jamie had that question. Yep.
Right.
Yeah, you read my mind.
Absolutely. Yeah, and it was kind of really top of my mind as well when I started looking at this, and at the moment you can't do that because it's only Dataverse connections that you can use. But as I understand it, that is definitely the ultimate goal, because that is the logical conclusion of convergence. Yeah, that there shouldn't be limitations. If it's PowerFX, that there may be a slightly different implementation of the PowerFX command. Like you noticed I was using notify, right? And the notify dropdown is a model-driven implementation of notify rather than the Canvas app. So there may be subtle different implementations, but ultimately there should be sort of parity between the things you can do. And because it's a component library, it's not like a different implementation of the PowerFX runtime. For me, that's what's so special about this. Is it's not like, okay, well, we're going to implement a subset of PowerFX kind of expressions inside model-driven apps. It's not that. It's actually, it is the same thing. It's the same runtime that's being used in Canvas apps as it is in model-driven apps. And so because of that, I'm really hopeful that we all of these kind of things will start to be unlocked. But as for limitations, I mean, that blog post there atop the comparison between the Ribbon Workbench and the PowerFX, that does outline a lot of the current limitations if you're used to using classic buttons. In model-driven apps, that it kind of compares what you might have done with what you can and what you can't yet do. So I would refer to that. But yeah, I mean, again, it's a journey. This is really early days, and we've only just had this in public preview, for 2 weeks. So it's pretty special already. But I'm really excited about where it's going.
Absolutely. I think Eric, you had a question. Did you want to unmute and ask the question?
Yeah, my question was, is the long-term goal with this to replace the Ribbon Workbench?
Well, yeah, I think that would be my ultimate goal. I don't think it's really about replacing the Ribbon Workbench per se, because it's not like, okay, well, we're trying to build a designer on top of what the Ribbon Workbench does at the moment. Because the way it works is that these V2 buttons are kind of merged in with the classic buttons. I don't think that classic buttons are going to be going away anytime soon. Because if you think about it, all of the first-party apps, the Dynamics apps, they're all using classic buttons. A lot of the platform buttons are all going to be classic buttons. So, there's a huge amount of work to, if you think about, okay, well, when could you remove the classic stuff? But certainly in terms of unblocking the scenarios, I think the plan is to be able to say, well, for the vast majority of the things that people tend to do in customizing model-driven apps using the Ribbon Workbench, we want to unlock the V2 way of doing it, right? So it's not about replacing it, but it's about, well, what do people normally do? There are some things that are kind of outlying things that maybe they're not going to be immediately on that roadmap. Like, for example, customizing the global command bar. You remember that bit at the top that I was talking about? Where is it? I've still got it open. Yeah, this bit across the top here. Yeah. At the moment with the Ribbon Workbench, you can customize that, but that's quite an unusual way of doing things, and so not many people tend to do it. So that may stay for us for quite some time using classic, if ever be replaced by Commanding V2. I don't know. There are other things like the application ribbon, adding a button that applies everywhere. Again, I don't know if that's necessarily going to be something that's on the immediate roadmap. One thing I didn't mention, which is quite a fundamental difference between the Ribbon Workbench and quite an important one, I think, is that when I'm editing this command bar here, it's actually linked to the app that I'm editing it from, right? So with the Ribbon Workbench, if you wanted to have a button that was only displayed for a particular app, you had to add some kind of custom JavaScript rule in to do that, whereas this is sort of much more intrinsically linked to an app. So there are a few kind of fundamental different ways of looking at it, but it's all about unblocking the common scenarios for the V2 commanding. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you so much.
We do have one more question from Philip. Did you want to unmute and ask the question?
Hi, Scott. I'm stalking you again. I was just wondering if you noticed if there's a lag when the PowerFx engine loads up on, or does it not load up the full PowerFx engine that you might get with Canvas app, and it get transpiled server side and the browser get fed JavaScript just for doing that button?
Yeah. So I certainly not noticed any lag, and I think the reason for that is, I think it's exactly as you just alluded to, is that there isn't the same kind of app magic control framework that needs to be loaded. It's just simply the PowerFx expression runtime, and PowerFx expressions are compiled into JavaScript. So when you publish your component library, it's actually creating a kind of compiled JavaScript piece of code that then would run not that much differently to if you've written some custom JavaScript. Yeah. So that's why I don't think that really there's going to be a massive noticeable difference. Now, that said, of course, in the same way as with Canvas apps, you can build expressions that perhaps are non-performant, especially things around delegation. Yeah, delegation is the big hot topic that you always look at when you're writing Canvas apps. It's like, do I need to pull down, 100,000 records in order to go and iterate and filter this data set? So, those kind of things obviously will equally apply. But, if you were writing JavaScript, you'd have to be worried about those things anyway. So I don't really see any significant difference there. But yeah, I haven't noticed any slowdown. So you're still going to get snappy model-driven apps. And of course, with custom pages, custom pages are actually loading the Canvas runtime alongside the model-driven runtime. But the great thing is it's not about iframes. There's no memory-hungry iframes involved. It's all running inside the main DOM of the model-driven app host. So again, it's kind of really performant in that respect.
Yeah, great. Thanks.
You're welcome.
Well, thank you, Scott. Thanks for taking the time to walking us through all the different or the art of possible with commanding, I should say, that we can all do and kind of get started on. And I think this is definitely a space that we should all try playing around with now that it's in preview, and I'm sure the story is going to evolve, and we're going to have support for several other things as this whole story of app making converges. Like you said, it's not really about Power Apps or model-driven apps. It's just app making is what we're really looking at. And also, allowing the low-code or citizen devs to kind of unite with any pro-code devs. So kind of just converge the whole story here. This is really awesome. Thank you again for taking the time to come share with us today. And I know I've shared your Twitter handle, your blog post, and your YouTube channel as well. And yes, there are the links right there. And feel free to reach out to Scott if you have any questions. And we will be posting the recording as well. If anyone who's missed the call can catch up again. But thanks everyone for joining us today. And I hope everybody has a great rest of the week. And until we see you all next time.
Thanks, everyone.